With the addition of the new Total War Warhammer 2 DLC, The Prophet and the Warlock, we've seen a slew of new units added to both the Skaven and the Lizardman rosters. From the red-crested skinks to the Ripperdactyls on the Lizardman side, and the Rattling Guns and Doomflayers on the Skaven side, just to kind of name a few of each. With these, we have also received the Regiments of Renown versions for both factions, bringing them up significantly in the power curve of the competitive multiplayer meta's kind of tier system. Today, we're going to talk about my top 5 picks for the best units of the new DLC. This list is very objective and really open to a lot of interpretation. It's purely anecdotal experience for the most part. And of course, this has the competitive multiplayer in mind. If you're looking for a top list of campaign units, this is not the video for you, as most if not all units can be viable in campaign anyway. So let's dive in on our first unit. Starting things off with our number 5 entry, the first on our list, the Thunderous one. Now this is the Regiment of Renown Ancient Stegadon for the Lizardman that was added with the new DLC. And honestly, he is a complete and absolute tank, just a total girth unit. This guy's at 2,300 points, which is 350 points more than the standard Ancient Stegadon, but you get so much for this package. So of course you do have the standard of 140 armor. This is the second highest armor in the game, behind stuff like the Rotting Leviathan, Ragnarok Spider at 150, and the Steam Tank at 160. But what makes this thing so completely ass-beating deadly? Well, his missile damage, for one, is 900 poison damage. And so he's going to be slowing things down, it's going to lower their weapon strength. In addition to that, this isn't the ballista variation of the Stegadon, this is the machine gun variation. You can see these guys with little blowguns up there, they'll just be shooting these things all willy-nilly at 115 range. You'll really be able to chunk down large pockets of infantry before you even charge into them, because this thing in and of itself is going to be doing AP damage and anti-infantry, so it's going to be able to mulch through so many of the harder to crack tier 3 units. In addition to all of that, it also causes terror, because, you know, it is a giant fucking Triceratops. So, one of the big things is, with every single Regiment of Renown, you do get the increase to their stat line. Well, this guy has a stat line of 44 melee defense. That's more than any dinosaur in the entire roster for the Lizardman. In addition to that, he's got 32 melee attack. The only thing that's got a higher melee attack than that is, let me move that off of there, that's ugly looking. The only thing that's got a higher melee attack than that are the Feral Carnosaurs, the Carnosaurs, you know, Grimlock for Krokgar's Carnosaur. So this is really the best kind of melee attack you're going to get from something that is not a Carnosaur. But I mean, the last thing that is going to be the big clincher for this guy, the big butt clincher, is the Judgment of Uxmox. Now the way this works is you can see there's no activatable buttons here or there, and as the Thunderous one is in combat, as we kind of look at this, it will go off for 4 seconds. It'll shoot 2 lightning bolts, and usually in the front and back of the model, or left and right sides. It doesn't usually stack up front and back, but it does a significant amount of damage, and it will recycle as long as he is in combat. So every 15 seconds, if this guy's in prolonged combat, he'll be just pooping lightning bolts from the high heavens on things. The Thunderous one is something that is going to, I think, be in a lot of competitive matchups in the games to come. Number 4 on our list, and our only siege piece, is an age-old classic, the Warp Lightning Cannon. But no any Warp Lightning Cannon, it gets Zap Zap. Now there are so many great things going for it gets Zap Zap here. Bring that up and take a look at its stat line. It's got AP, it's artillery, it does magic damage, a lot of these awesome things. But one of the kind of a little bit more under the hood of this is that this is only 200 points additional than the standard Warp Lightning Cannon. Kind of put that into a frame of reference for you, the Hammer of Witches, the Great Cannon Regiment of Renown for the Empire, is 300 points more than the standard Great Cannon. So you get a huge amount of benefit with a very small point increase by, you know, comparison of other Regiment of Renown artillery pieces. But one of the key notes here is you get 55 more weapon strength, right? You can see that kind of broken down here on the missile damage. But this isn't just simply a direct per shot weapon strength increase. Instead, it has a 14-second or 14.7 reload time versus the 18.4 reload time of a standard Warp Lightning Cannon. And this is something that we've seen a lot in this DLC, is the Regiment Renown versions of things, rather than having more raw damage, they simply reload faster. So I really like that take on things. Kind of helps balance stuff out a little bit versus it just outright doing balls out more damage. But The other thing here on the missile damage is the zap ability. Now, when we looked at this during the pre-release, the early access, this was a 15-second ability recharge. They've kind of nerfed it a little bit down to 10 ability recharge. But every time that this thing hits something, it's going to add 10 plus, or I'm going to add 10 abilities, 10 seconds to the ability recharge of that unit. So this is really going to be the bane of a lot of different, what would have been heavier and harder armies for the Lizardmen to crack. So if you think about this like the Greenskins, this is going to be able to reset WA on all their warlords, or on their main warlord. For dwarfs, this is going to reset the rune abilities on the rune lords and the rune smiths. You can use this to great effect on any one of the undead factions that have a lot of bound abilities. Pretty much any faction that thrives off their bound abilities, such as like Bretonia, if you're shooting into Lowen Leoncoeur, you can be able to shut down his shield of the Lion, Shield of Carcassonne, I think that's what it was. But you'll be able to shut that down by being able to increase the ability recharge on it. So a lot of really great uses out of Ikit's Zap Zap. Jumping back over to our Lizardman roster for our number 3 slot, we have the Ancient Salamanders. And this is our first non-Regiment of Renown. And they really outshine the Salamander hunting pack. If we take a look at here, they've got better stats all around. They're faster, they cause terror, and they're better in combat. And when I say they're better in combat, it's because they're single entity units. So they can break out of combat a lot easier, they can pass through things, and at 75 speed, they have a slight increase in speed over their pack counterparts. The Salamander hunting pack has a speed of 70, these have a speed of 75. Now, with that single entity, they don't get worse as the battle goes on. When you take a look at a unit of, just say, the Salamander hunting pack, for example, as the battle goes on, they get chipped away in health, they lose entities as part of their unit, and they cannot shoot out as much damage, they take leadership hits quicker. As a whole, single entities last through battles because their effectiveness doesn't decrease with their health like it does for large units. But in addition to that, they have a very high explosive damage. Let's go ahead and hover that over here. They can kill infantry in 2 or 3 dead-on shots, and I do say dead-on because their accuracy is a little, lacking. But if it hits dead-on, you're going to do so much damage. You can take out a unit of, just say, Dread Spears or Bleak Swords as just kind of a baseline here in 2 concerted shots, and that is pretty huge. In addition to that, they also have the Flammable special rule. Now this is going to give a plus 22% weakness to fire damage, and it's going to decrease the speed of things that are charging towards you. So this is a 20-second debuff, and they have a 10-second recycle on their breath attack. So they launch one shot, and it will do more damage on the second shot, and it will reset this flammable debuff. The big thing here is you can use this in conjunction with Salamander hunting packs to do even more damage, Fire Leech Bolas. There's a lot of synergies that you can build into this with the entire Lizardman roster. And on top of that, if you have like 2 or 3 of these guys focusing on a lord that's on foot no less, that lord will get roasted very quick. If they're on foot, they'll almost more than likely get knocked over or bulldozed over from the impact from the blast. And at 1,250 points, they're very, very cheap. I think we're going to start seeing these guys a lot in Lizardman builds alongside the Thunderous one that we talked about earlier. Our number 2 slot belongs to Natty Bobo's Sharpshooters, the Regiment of Renown version of the Warlock Jezzails. And the Warlock Jezzails on their own are a great unit, but snipers are even better. I mean, these guys are all around, kind of an all-around unit, kind of a jack of all trades when it comes to so many different threats that they can neutralize. They have snipe and stalk, which we can see here on their unit card. And as we all know, snipe, the way it works is if your unit is in stock, as these guys will be when they start their game, if they shoot from stock, from being hidden, they won't be revealed by that action. You can keep them stock or hidden for a long time, and it's going to force your opponent out to go and discover where these things are so they can either countercharge them, they can start putting artillery fire into them, or other range fire. But with that, we'll get actually back to a little bit on the missile damage there, but in addition to their raw abilities, they also have Shield Breaker, which is going to reduce the missile parry of anything that they're shooting at, namely any kind of high-valued infantry or even a high-valued heavy cavalry unit. They've got so many different applications. And at 300 range, they can outtrade almost any other, they can outtrade any other missile troop in the game. In addition to that, they also have silver shields. So if you have another missile unit that is shooting back at them, they'll absorb that damage from small arms fire quite well. And they have such a significant range that they can actually snipe out artillery pieces, because they will effectively shoot and destroy artillery pieces before they'll kill the crew, which is a really, really kind of hidden gem about these guys. At 300 range with snipe and stock, you can get them in range of an artillery piece and actually snipe that thing out before it can do a significant amount of damage to your entire faction or to your army. In addition to, these guys have that range, so they can focus down flying lords, anything that would come to actually do damage to them, just as long as you get them in a good advantageous position. And with snipe and stock, you're going to be able to do that quite easily. So these guys more than earned their second place slot here, and we've already seen them played a ton throughout the Everchosen Invitational. And I actually conferred with Loxlon Soothsayer for a lot of the things on this list, and he was saying that all my Skaven builds include Natty Bubo's Sharpshooters now, and it actually unlocks a lot of freedom in your Skaven builds, because you're not locked into dealing with long-range missile units or long-range artillery pieces, because these things can directly threaten them. So you do have a lot of different uses with Natty Bubo's Sharpshooters. Number one on our list, though, belongs to the Doomflayers. Now, these are, of course, a new unit, a variation of the Skaven weapon team from the tabletop, and these things are they're absolutely broken. They have a very small hitbox, so they're just impossible to snipe out from a range perspective, either with artillery pieces or with missile fire from, say, Way Watchers or any other kind of long-range missiles. But honestly, with the addition of Doomflayers, we've seen a huge shift in a lot of different components of the Skaven meta. In the past, dwarves typically were favored in a matchup against a Skaven, but kind of a nod to their lore, the Doomflayers actually make it so that the Skaven can compete, if not outright destroy dwarfs in their matchups now, because you've got these these 3 unit chariots that are 95 weapon strength, AP, anti-infantry, that can thunder downfield and do a ton of damage. At around, I think it's 1100 points for the non-regiment of renown one, you can do so much damage with these guys because they're impossible to snipe out by the time they get there, and there's no heavy cavalry or heavy monstrous unit to lock these things down. Their big counter is a good heavy cav or a good monstrous unit that, of course, like I said, the dwarfs lack. And again, this plays very heavily into the tabletop lore behind the Doomflayer. If you look at this thing, it's actually supposed to be the very first Doomflayers were constructed from like the failed pieces of a gyrocopter, and it was used to basically be thrown down the tight tunnels of the underway when the Skaven were fighting the dwarfs. So it's kind of in a way fitting that this is what kind of helps tip the scales for the Skaven in a dwarf Skaven matchup. I mean, even the name of the Regiment Renown version is called Dwarf Thing Menace, so it's kind of a cool kind of nod to that. But at the same time, these things really have the capability to outperform Gorebeast chariots, which I'd argue are some of the best anti-infantry AP chariots in the game. I mean, they can do better against cavalry. They're better in prolonged combat because of their wild attack animations and their really tight hitboxes. In addition to that, they just are way better because they're harder to hit too than the Gorebeast chariot is. The Gorebeast chariot is easier to snipe out. It's a lot slower on the battlefield. The Doomflayer, though, can just kind of like Tokyo drift through everything and just kind of scurry through stuff. So honestly, I would argue that, and this is totally like anecdotal, this is like the best 3-unit cavalry piece in the game now. I just think it is so strong. And if you take 2 or 3 of these, while it's like, if you think of the competitive Shetland Apache tournament rules, it is legal, but it is so disgusting. These things just rip through stuff with reckless abandon, and if you don't have the heavy cav to pin them down, they're just going to push through and push through and push through. But honestly, I think that these guys, they really deserve their spot as the number 1 on this list. I think everyone during the Everchosen Invitational was saying like, oh yeah, my Skaven build's going to have like 5 Doomflayers in it. Hyperbole, but still. I mean, if you take a look at the other stats of these things, you also have the best defense, which gives 24 armor to them. I mean, 100 in armor on what is supposed to be like a watered-down Doom Wheel. It doesn't feel like a watered-down Doom Wheel, that's for sure. And if you take a look at the Regiment Renown version, you're also getting the ability to cause fear and sunder armor. There you go. Ooh, had to hover over that. I think it's like 250 points more. So the Doomflayer is so cost effective, and it is able to dish out so much damage. So if you are against a heavily armored opponent, count on taking 1 if not 2 Doomflayer. But this concludes our big list here, our big top 5, with the Doom Flayers holding that coveted #1 spot. And that isn't to say that the rest of the units in this roster are not good. They're actually amazing. If you take a look at a lot of the other stuff that I didn't mention, and I'll give an honorable mention to stuff like the Red-Crested Skink Chief. If you were to put him on an Ancient Stegodon, he still retains his Frenzy. His Warrior Crest ability gives him 44 melee attack and 20 some odd melee defense. He is just an absolute sniper of a lord. I mean, he can actually go toe to toe with people like Kolek or Tyrion and actually pull out ahead, if not even win. So there are so many new additions to the Lizardmen and the Skaven roster that really helps them with a lot of matchups they struggled with before. I didn't even talk about a single one of the Ripperdactyls, but the Ripperdactyls are amazing at just completely destroying a lot of the heavily armored flying lords that we see as such a huge portion of the competitive multiplayer meta. Like, you take a look at the vampire counts, you take a look at the dark elves, you see the, not the Morathi, but the Malekiths, you see the Red Dukes that are just able to do so much damage, and the Ripperdactyls can do a lot. The Colossedon Hunters are able to completely take care of a Necrosphinx on their own if they pop their Blot Toad ability. So you have a lot of really cool kits and ways and answers to a lot of different things with a lot of the stuff in the new DLC. But I think these are my big top 5 that I think are going to be making it into almost every single list here today. But guys, that concludes our video here today. So let me know what your thoughts are on some of these top 5. Do you think that all of these are good? Do you think there's other things that you would have liked to have seen this list? I'd love to get a better idea of what you guys think. Again, this is purely anecdotal. I talked to Turin, I talked to Shetland Apache, Aerocrastic, and Loxlon Soothsayer, and Felcon, and King of the Dead. And just like, hey, what's your take on things? Here's what I got from playing in the pre-release. What are your takes? And a lot of these stats haven't changed. I feel like the whole Red-Crested Skink Chieftain on Ancient Pterodon, or I'm sorry, Ancient Triceratops, Stegodon, shouldn't have frenzies. That might be a bug, so don't go betting on that in the future. But I think as a whole, a lot of these have a lot of really great synergies with the rest of the army. But as always, guys, thanks so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.